Welcome to Unite and Win, a guide to workplace organizing, a podcast series by the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, presented in partnership with Haymarket Books. My name is Wes Holing. I'm the Communications Coordinator at the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. This podcast is broken up into two parts: an audiobook version of our Unite and Win handbook, which is also available in paperback and ebook formats from Haymarket, and a handful of discussion episodes hosted by labor journalist and author Kim Kelly. Kim will be speaking with a diverse group of experienced labor organizers to go deeper on some of the themes we talk about in the handbook and other topics relevant to the labor movement. This is the introductory chapter to our Unite and Win handbook, published in 2024 by Haymarket Books. What's in this audiobook? The Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, or EWOC, has trained and supported thousands of workers just like you. We've trained nonprofit workers, school bus drivers, and early childhood educators on how to talk to their coworkers about collective action. We've supported workers in retail stores and graduate programs when they marched on their bosses. We've coached pizzeria workers, baristas, and rock climbing gym workers when they decided to unionize. We wrote this guide to share the knowledge we gathered in all of those experiences to empower you and your coworkers to win the workplace improvements you deserve. This guide serves as a companion to the EWOC Foundational Training Program. You'll find a series of lessons here that correspond with the program's 4 training sessions. Each lesson covers a different core element of organizing at the workplace: the organizing committee, the organizing conversation, collective action, and inoculation against the boss's response. There are many forms that your efforts to win positive changes at work can take. You may decide to focus on specific changes to your workplace that a majority of your coworkers want to see in an issue-based campaign, or you may pursue unionization. Even within union drives, there are different models. You may affiliate with an established union, or you may choose to file for an independent union. You may even decide to act as a union before you have support from a majority of your coworkers, something called pre-majority unionism. Whatever your path is, at its core, it involves organizing. And that's what this handbook is all about. You can use this guide to review the lessons at the end of each corresponding foundational training session. If you are not currently enrolled in one of our trainings, each lesson has a recommended accompanying video for you to view before or after your reading. You can find those online at workerorganizing.org. But organizing is a team project, and the materials in here are intended as supplements to group discussions. So find yourself a buddy or a group of coworkers and follow along with our videos and materials to talk about your organizing plans. Introduction: Organizing your coworkers for change. What is organizing? Over decades of struggle, our movement has learned crucial methods for building worker power in the workplace. Workplace organizing usually requires steps such as the following: reaching out to diverse groups of workers, finding common interests, overcoming differences, and building relationships. Asking coworkers to join an organizing committee. Planning and carrying out actions to improve working conditions. Recruiting others to help plan and execute tasks, come to meetings, or participate in actions. Helping others develop confidence in themselves and their coworkers. Having one-on-one conversations with coworkers about forming a union. And preparing your coworkers for what the bosses will try and do to stop the union. In organizing your workplace, you must reach out to every single coworker. And you need to find a way to connect with people with whom you might not find it so easy to connect. This will be difficult, but it's worth it, because to win any demands or a union at your workplace, you need to have support from a strong majority. This guide will give you the tools you need to organize your coworkers so you can win dignity and respect, better working conditions, real job security, and a real democratic say at work. By learning to organize, you can be part of rebuilding a fighting labor movement with the power to take on the billionaire class and transform society. Why we organize. Organizing is how we change the world. We organize collectively because there is power and safety in numbers. When a workplace is organized, it means the workers have come together and built a structure to fight for justice at work. We can win dignity and respect, better salaries and benefits, and protections from abusive bosses. Workers who are organized have far more power together than an individual on their own. Organizing in the workplace is especially effective because as workers, we provide the labor. Without our labor, there is no company, no institution, no product, no service. That gives us leverage and power when we act together. So why isn't every workplace organized? In addition to there being historically weak labor laws in the US that can make unions difficult to form, our bosses and their bosses, all the way up to the CEO and the shareholders, profit more when we aren't organized. If workers aren't organized, then our bosses can pay us less and keep more revenue for themselves. They can treat us poorly and fire us for no good reason. They can make every decision by themselves to benefit only themselves. That's why bosses will do anything they can to prevent workers from organizing. They want the workplace to stay in their control, forcing us to choose between obeying and quitting. But even though it takes time and effort, any worker, anywhere, can organize and win. In this guide, we are primarily focused on new organizing, which refers to organizing workers at a workplace that does not currently have a union, often with the intent to unionize and win a first contract. What is a union? A union is an organization of coworkers who join together to improve their working conditions. If the union has proven that it represents a majority of workers, the employer is required by law to recognize the union and begin to bargain in good faith. One benefit of a recognized union is that it puts into legally binding contracts your terms of employment and enables you and your coworkers to negotiate those terms. A contract makes it illegal for the employer to unilaterally roll back your gains. Across the board, workers in unionized jobs have higher pay. Union workers earn 17% more than non-union workers. They have better health insurance. More than 90% of unionized workers have access to employer-provided health insurance compared with 68% of non-union workers. They have better retirement benefits. 93% of unionized workers in private industry have access to employer-sponsored retirement plans compared with just 66% of non-union workers. And they have a stronger voice on the job. Unions negotiate schedules, health, safety, and anti-harassment policies, promotional opportunities, and job security. Unions can also be our voice in the broader community. There's a long history of organized workers winning major social gains like the 8-hour workday, the weekend, Social Security, civil rights, immigrant rights, and more. At their best, unions don't advocate just for their members. They fight for the entire working class, including those workers who aren't and never will be union members. Union members are the union. The union isn't an organization outside of the members. It may affiliate with a national parent union, often called an international, which provides it with helpful resources including legal counsel to navigate labor laws. But members are the ultimate decision makers and the ones who elect their leadership. In the best examples, union members are involved in every step of the contract negotiation process. Workers in a union can set their own bargaining agenda and vote on contracts. They often vote to take collective action if the boss refuses to meet their terms during negotiations. Democracy in a union allows workers of all races, ethnicities, genders, and sexual orientations to have a voice. Independent unions. In some cases where workers have not found a suitable established union, they will decide to form their own independent union. This union will have no formal ties to a national or international union. It often means that its members are filing for a union election themselves. For some workplaces, there can be benefits to this approach, but filing independently is a tricky and bureaucratic process, so don't go it alone. EWOC has resources and organizers who can walk you through the process so that you don't miss deadlines or make other small mistakes that can disqualify your filing. Union members are often referred to as the rank and file. Rank and file activity and leadership is the central element in the strategy laid out in this guide. Pre-majority unionism. In some cases, such as with public sector workers in many states, workers can't get legal union recognition and a contract. Or maybe they believe that winning an election will take many years, as is sometimes the case for workers in very large workplaces. In these situations, there's another kind of unionism outside the traditional path of organizing, pre-majority unions. In the broadest sense, pre-majority unionism is a union model in which workers organize and act like a union, sometimes even collecting dues, even though they have not filed for NLRB recognition. This can be a viable alternative for those seeking to win gains at work. You can find much more information about pre-majority unionism on our website at workerorganizing.org. If you reach out to EWOC for support, experienced EWOC organizers can help you navigate the process of pre-majority unionism. Unite and Win is presented in partnership with Haymarket Books, publisher of a wide range of essential books, especially relevant to listeners like you. One that you might be interested in is Class Struggle Unionism by Joe Burns. The concept of class struggle unionism is rooted in the belief that our union fights exist within a larger struggle between an exploiting billionaire class and the working class, which actually produces the goods and services in society. From that simple proposition flows a powerful and radical form of unionism. Drawing on years of labor activism and study of labor history, Joe Burns shows how this approach to organization can create a more militant, democratic, and fighting labor movement. As UE General President Carl Rosen puts it, anyone trying to rebuild an effective U.S. labor movement needs to read Class Struggle Unionism. You can find the book at haymarketbooks.org, where all paperback books are 20% off every day. Who doesn't want to have a union job? Consider two examples of Gary, a non-union worker, and Gail, a union worker. Gary has to go to HR alone to complain about harassment. He has to negotiate a new salary one-on-one with his boss. And he feels underqualified for a new responsibility at work and doesn't know what to do. Gail, who's in a union, can file a grievance with her entire union backing her. She has a whole bargaining committee to negotiate her salary. And she turns to her union steward for guidance and help in finding skills training. Meanwhile, after a workplace injury, Gary has to figure out how to file workers' compensation by himself. He gets written up and then fired with almost no opportunity for him to question his treatment. But Gail, in her union, asks for help from the union steward and others who have done it before. Her boss has to give her notice before he writes her up, and then a union steward is in the room during the discipline meeting to defend her. A union steward, also called a shop steward, is a coworker and member of the union whom coworkers elect to represent them and the union to management. Spotlight. What is the NLRA? The right to unionize is protected by the National Labor Relations Act, NLRA, also known as the Wagner Act. The National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, is the federal agency that enforces the NLRA. Before the NLRA was passed in 1935, unions were often considered criminal conspiracies. But with the law's passage, workers won the right to bargain collectively and strike. It also codified what it meant for employers to engage in unfair labor practices and required them to bargain in good faith. The NLRA protects private sector workers and cannot be overridden by local laws. Bosses have spent decades lobbying to erode it. The limits of the NLRA. Public sector employees are not covered by the National Labor Relations Act. Laws governing public sector collective bargaining vary greatly state by state. In some states, laws apply statewide as well as at the municipal level. In others, no statewide collective bargaining laws exist, but some local jurisdictions may have laws covering their employees. Some states don't require collective bargaining, but they also don't prohibit it. The Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas currently outright prohibit public sector workers from collective bargaining. However, in accordance with their First Amendment rights, workers in those states can still form non-recognized unions. Other work sites that don't fall under the jurisdiction of the NLRB are federal sector workplaces where the Federal Labor Relations Authority governs labor relations. Likewise, the railway and airline industries are covered by the Railway Labor Act. The NLRA also excludes from protection agricultural and farm workers, domestic workers, gig workers, and independent contractors. However, some of these workers may have specific organizing protections through state laws. If you are angry about your working conditions but fall within an unprotected category as a worker, don't despair. Even in situations with no formal collective bargaining, workers have formed and joined non-recognized unions or associations to advocate for their interests in the workplace and in the state legislature. They've taken collective action and even gone on to strike. When workers come together, they can win gains even in legally unfavorable terrain. How How can workers form a legally recognized union? Federal law provides two ways that private sector workers can form a union legally recognized by employers: recognition by election and recognition by card check. Recognition by election is the most common way workers form a union. This is a campaign coordinated by workers to gain recognition from their employer for collective bargaining purposes. The campaign involves three things. First, workers organizing and gathering signatures from a majority of employees in the proposed bargaining unit, which is the group of workers to be represented by the union, on union authorization cards or via a petition. Deciding whether to have coworkers sign union cards or add their names to a petition demanding recognition is a tactical choice you will have to make. If you want to build support, sometimes creating a petition signed by many coworkers makes more of an impact on hesitant coworkers. Second, the campaign involves filing a petition with the NLRB to hold a secret ballot election. Legally, only 30% of employees must petition for an election, but most union campaigns will not file for an election unless they have signatures from a majority of the workers. And third, if a majority of voting workers vote for the union, the employer must recognize the union for purposes of collective bargaining. If the workers do not secure a majority vote, then the union is not formally recognized and the employer is not required to bargain with the workers. A tied election is a lost election. Defining the bargaining unit in an election. One tactic employers use to delay or undermine elections and negotiations is to contest the size and scope of the bargaining unit. For example, the boss might argue that the unit is actually larger than members claim it is, and that they do not in fact represent enough of the unit to qualify for an election. The boss often does this because they know a significant component of this expanded bargaining unit is less organized or even anti-union. Or the boss might argue that the union can only represent a smaller segment of the workforce. Again, they will often zero in on less organized departments or categories of workers. Bargaining units are groups of workers who share clear community interest and constitute a distinct, recognizable, and homogeneous group of workers to be represented by a particular union. Bargaining unit members must be easily identifiable based on their job classification, department, location, skill, or other factor. Who is legally excluded from the bargaining unit? One example is a confidential employee, a term referring to someone who has duties involving access to information on the boss's labor relations or bargaining strategy. Another example is a manager who has the authority to hire and fire, offer promotions and bonuses, transfer or schedule other employees, and influence the company's policies. A supervisor, though they may perform managerial duties, can still be included in the unit if they don't have these authorities. And lastly, any workers who do not meet the criteria or classification that define the bargaining unit can be excluded from it. Recognition by card check, or voluntary recognition, is the other, much rarer way for workers to form a union. Here, a majority of workers in a proposed bargaining unit sign cards indicating that they want to be represented by a union. The employer then agrees voluntarily to recognize the union as the legal representative of the workers, thus averting the need for a secret ballot election. A card check campaign is much fairer than an election campaign because the employer is not waging an anti-union campaign to undermine the will of the majority of the workers. Although federal law clearly gives private sector workers the right to organize a union without fear of employer interference, in reality, most employers vigorously oppose their employees' efforts to form a union by running aggressive and often illegal anti-union campaigns aimed at scaring and intimidating the workers from supporting the union. So, while the steps to winning a union are straightforward, workers still have to run smart and strategic campaigns to stay ahead of aggressive opposition from their employers. A local union is an affiliate of a statewide, national, or international union and represents one or more bargaining units. Also called local association or local for short, it has its own set of bylaws and elected leadership. What's in a contract? A union contract, also known as a collective bargaining agreement or CBA, is a legally binding document that spells out the terms and conditions of employment for unionized workers. It is negotiated between the union representing the workers and the employer and typically covers issues such as wages, benefits, staffing, working hours, job security, and workplace safety. Union contracts ensure that workers have a real voice in their workplace and are treated fairly and with respect. Before a contract goes into effect, it must be voted on by the workers. The basics of union elections. After workers submit cards asking for an election and the minimum number of signatures has been confirmed, the NLRB sets the election date. There are rules that the NLRB sets to ensure elections are conducted in an expeditious manner. Often the employer will attempt to slow down this process in order to have more time to run an anti-union campaign. The organizing committee should anticipate the strategy and have a plan for how to counter it and keep the momentum on their side. Once the NLRB sets the election date, the leadership team or organizing committee, also known as the OC, should make sure that they know where every pro-union worker will be on that day and get their commitment to vote. For workers who are not going to be at work that day, the committee needs a plan for how to get them to vote, because on election day, its job is to get every yes voter to the polling place. Alternatively, some elections are done by mail-in ballots. In that case, the agency running the election, often the NLRB or State Labor Board, for example, mails the ballots. These need to be marked and returned by a certain date to be valid. When the election is over and the NLRB is counting the votes, the job of the OC is to monitor and ensure that all eligible votes are counted. Election victories are always exhilarating, emotional moments for workers. Your OC should definitely take time to celebrate and bask in the incredible achievements that you have made. But once the union wins the election, the work is not done. The OC needs to begin preparing for the contract campaign and contract negotiations. This is because, in practice, even once an election has been won, employers still do everything to avoid bargaining in good faith with the new union. Winning a good contract can often be an even greater challenge than a union election. Thanks for listening to Unite and Win, a guide to workplace organizing from the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee and Haymarket Books. Visit haymarketbooks.org to find indispensable radical books, podcasts, virtual events, and other political education resources, including the Unite and Win handbook. Please also consider joining the Haymarket Book Club, one of the best ways to support Haymarket and help fund projects like this one. I'm your audiobook host, Wes Holing. Julia Yort is our senior producer, and Rachel Leitner is our engineer. Production support from Dafna Tir and Megan Swabada. Music from Epidemic Sound. The Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee supports any worker, anywhere in the country, in any sector, organizing for something better. Visit us at workerorganizing.org if you're ready to organize your workplace or volunteer with us. Please also consider making a donation in support of our work at workerorganizing.org/donate. Listen to Unite and Win, a guide to workplace organizing, wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and share with anyone who might benefit from it.